All right, everyone. So here we are, just one day away from Election Day. And in tonight's live streams, I will be talking about the elections, giving my predictions, which I hate to do because I think some states are too close that we really can't give a prediction. But I know people are going to say that, but you have to give a prediction. I will do that in tonight's live stream. But in this video, we're going to go state by state through the races. So we're going to talk about the presidential race, the Senate races, if there are some, governor's races, if there are some as well, and maybe the state legislatures. Does one chamber in a state legislature look like it could change or not? Now, I'm also going to talk about the congressional races as well, so we'll get into those. With those state races, I'm not going to get into the little granular of like State House District 47 or something. No, I'll let you go ahead and look at that. But just go ahead and put the chambers on your radar so you know what to look for on election night. So go ahead, get a paper and a pencil. Go ahead and write these down because these are going to be the races that you're going to want to watch. But we'll go through every single state. So let's go ahead and start with Alabama. All right, so let's go ahead and start off with Alabama. And as you can see, the Republicans are going to win the presidency. Donald Trump will win, but we don't have a U.S. Senate race, a gubernatorial race. And interesting, we don't have any state legislative races because they elect every 4 years in both the Senate and the House. And so those always happen during the midterm elections. However, if we look at the Alabama 2nd Congressional District, a new one that has been drawn, the Democrats are likely to win this. And this is probably a strong Democratic seat in all reality, but there is a very slight possibility that the Republican could win. But this is a more than certain pickup for the Democrats. Now, if you go ahead and look at Alaska, we do have that Trump is slightly leading there, and that might even be more of a likely state for Donald Trump. We'll see what happens because it is a later time zone race that we have. U.S. Senate and gubernatorial races have no one in them. Those are not up this time. But what's really interesting is the state house and the state Senate. Now, you see those margins of +9 and +3, and those might look like they're larger margins, but the Democrats and Republicans usually go in coalition and do this coalition building like we see in Europe. So there are only a few seats that actually might change control of the legislature. So in these situations, we just see how the Republican Party in general is up on the Democrats and everybody else. But the coalitions can actually change this. Now, of course, we have the at-large congressional seat, and that does look more and more like it's likely going to go toward the Democrats. All right, so let's go ahead and look at Arizona, and I think this is probably the most interesting state if we look at overall elections. Obviously, the presidential race is tied. The U.S. Senate race, Ruben Gallego looks to be in control of that, so it's likely to go Democratic. We don't have a gubernatorial election this year, but the governor is a Democrat, Katie Hobbs, which makes the next two races really important, state house and state Senate. And as you can see, the Republicans only have a lead of 2 in both of those chambers. So the Democrats could take control of the legislature in both chambers and also have the governorship. So that is hugely important when it comes to Arizona. All right, and when we look at congressional districts, we also see that Arizona has a number of districts that could go either way. The 2nd Congressional District does look like it's going to go Republican with the 4th leaning Democratic, but the 1st and 6th are real toss-ups. Now, as far as Arkansas, there's just nothing going on in Arkansas. It's very strong Republican on both sides. There's no Senate race or gubernatorial election. But even if they were, they would be strongly Republican as well. So now let's go ahead and look at California, and this shouldn't surprise you at all. When it comes to the presidential race, Senate race, we don't have a gubernatorial race, and the state assembly and the state Senate will be very strongly Democratic. However, when we look at the congressional districts, we have a lot of districts that are held by Republicans that are toss-ups. So you can see here we have a lot of districts between Republican +2 and Democratic +5 that are toss-ups. That 3rd Congressional District is an R+4 that could possibly go Democratic as well, but almost all of these are toss-up seats. But we're not even done with this. There's another page. So you can see here we have a few more that are also toss-up. Now, the 49th Congressional District, that's Katie Porter's district, and people are wondering if that might go to the Republicans. It does look like it's slightly Democratic right now, as it was when Katie Porter was the member of Congress there. So that one should stay in Democratic hands. All right, so when we look at Colorado, we expect Kamala Harris to win this state. There isn't a U.S. Senator or a governor's race this time, and both of the legislative chambers are strong for the Democrats. However, we do have a congressional district up in the Fort Collins area that is mixed between college students in Fort Collins and rural areas that are very Republican. That is Congressional District 8, and that is a pure toss-up. Right now, the incumbent is a Democrat. Looking at Connecticut here, again, we see the same thing. We see the Democrats dominating in the presidential, U.S. Senate race, and the state legislative races. However, we do have one race in Connecticut that could maybe be close, and that's the 5th Congressional District, and the Democrats are probably going to win that, but just keep an eye in case something might happen there. It could be closer than we think. When we come to Delaware, it's not even a contest. There are no, it's an at-large district congressionally, but the Democrats are expected to dominate in everything in Delaware. And then when it comes to Florida, the Republicans will do quite well in Florida. Right now, we have a lean Republican as far as Donald Trump winning, and Rick Scott is kind of in the same boat, though that one might become a little bit closer. When it comes to the state house and the state senate, the Republicans are in a strong position. They'll keep that strong position. The question is whether they'll keep a supermajority or not. But we do have some congressional races in Florida to watch. So the 13th Congressional District, the one that we ran the poll on, is as of right now, I would say slightly Republican, but that is a district that is really focusing on a lot of local issues. We also have a few more congressional districts that you can see here, but they're likely to either be Republican or Democratic. So the Florida 23rd is Jared Moskowitz's district, and he is probably going to win that, but it is close there. Now, of course, we come to Georgia, and the interesting about Georgia is that the presidential race is really the star of the election. We don't have a state senate race. We don't have a gubernatorial race. The state house and state senate races in Georgia are not competitive, and the same thing can be said for the congressional districts. Maybe Sanford Bishop's district is a little bit less than usual. The 2nd Congressional District, he's a Democrat. He should win that fine. But basically, in Georgia, the top and only billing is the presidential race. When it comes to Hawaii, no surprise here. We see that the Democrats are strong in the U.S. Senate seat, the legislative races as well as the presidency. There is no gubernatorial election this cycle. If we look at Iowa, we have it as a toss-up because of the latest Seltzer poll. There are no elections for governor or U.S. Senate, so this is pretty much going to be, just like we were talking about with Georgia, basically a very strong presidential race here. And we also have the House and the Senate, but those are strongly Republican and not expected to change. However, we do have to look at the Iowa congressional races. Because of the Seltzer poll, we now have more races that are going to be competitive. So the 1st, the 2nd, and the 3rd congressional district are all in play. Each one of them are +3 to +4 Republican, and they are essentially toss-ups now. So the Democrats could possibly win every one of these. I would say the Republicans still have a slight advantage, but the Democrats could absolutely pick these up. And this, in and of itself right here, would be half of the margin that the Democrats would need to win. Now, when you look at Idaho, there's no surprise here. Trump's going to win it strongly. There's no U.S. Senate or governor's race, and the state house and Senate will go strongly Republican. In the state of Illinois as well, kind of the same thing. The Democrats are going to dominate statewide, and when we look at the U.S. Senate race, there are no U.S. Senate races this year, but the state house and the state Senate, or we should say the state assembly when it comes to the state house, is going to be strongly Democratic. However, there is one congressional race that we want to look at in Illinois, and that is the 17th. That was probably likely to go Democratic, but it is a district that is a lot of Peoria, but a lot of rural areas that will go more Republican compared to Peoria, which is Democratic. This is Sherry Bustos' old seat, but the Democrats should still be able to win this. Now, when we look at Indiana, we can see that Trump will win it. Now, when it comes to the U.S. Senate governor's race, the Republicans are probably going to win it quite handily. But some polling indicates that it might be a little bit closer than we think, and we see the state house and Senate. They're very strongly for the Republicans and will stay that way after Election Day. Now, with that being the case, I did want to mention the 1st congressional district. This is a Democrat +3 district. It goes Democratic. Usually it's becoming more and more Republican, but the Republicans have always tried to win this district, and they just haven't been able to crack that nut. So I don't think they will this time. Keep an eye on it. It could flip, but I don't think it is likely that it will. Now, if we look at Kansas, I'm putting likely Republican because we had that one poll that showed it being really close, but I really believe probably it's truly more strongly Republican. We don't have a U.S. Senate or governor's race in Kansas this year, and the state House and Senate are dominated by Republicans, and this is pretty much what to expect. I'm not really going to talk about the congressional districts because even though some look close as far as the partisan rating, whoever we're talking about in those usually perform quite well. In Kentucky, we have a very strong Republican electorate, and you can see in the presidential race, Trump's expected to win. No Senate or governor's races. And the same thing with the state House and Senate, dominated by Republicans. Now, when it comes to Louisiana, it is just a presidential state here. We don't have U.S. senators. We don't have governors. We don't have the state House or the state Senate because all of those statewide races are in off-year elections. So no elections for any of those this year. However, one thing that you have to keep in mind, there was a new district drawn, and that is the 6th congressional district that was made to put a Democrat in there. So this is another pickup that the Democrats are going to have in the House of Representatives. Let's go to Massachusetts, where this should be absolutely no surprise to anybody, with the Democrats dominating in every single category. If we look at Maryland as well, it's pretty much the same way. Yes, the Senate race could be a little bit closer with the former governor in there running for the Republicans, but it's still likely to be a very strong Democratic day. There's nothing really to look at when it comes to the statewide races. However, when we look at the 6th congressional district, which is a +2, the Democrats should still win that. There's enough suburban area that's Democratic in that district that should give it to the Democrats. But this might be a district that you want to watch out for on Election Day. Now, Maine is kind of interesting. I have the asterisk there mostly because I say likely Democratic because you have that 2nd congressional district that's probably going to go to Trump, whereas the other electoral votes are going to go to the Democrats. Angus King in the U.S. Senate now, he's going to easily win re-election in the Senate, but you can see that both the state House and the state Senate are very strong for Democrats with no gubernatorial elections this year in Maine. And one other thing, too, is because the Maine 2nd congressional district is held by a Democrat, even though it's an R+6 district, it should still be Democratic, but it's slight. So the Republicans really do have a chance here. All right, so we come to Michigan, and this is another interesting state, just like Arizona. We see the presidential race as a toss-up. We do see slight Democratic for the U.S. Senate race. It does seem like Slotkin is constantly winning in the polls, so I think that bodes well for no gubernatorial elections. But you can see the state House and the state Senate with only a +2 margin in both of those chambers that the Democrats have, so the Republicans could pick those up. Hopefully the Democrats are strong there, but it is close. Now, when we come to the congressional districts, it is a little bit harder for the Democrats as well. So Slotkin's old district, the 7th congressional district, which is R+2, is a toss-up race. And Dan Kildee's race in the 8th congressional district is also a toss-up race. So there's a possibility that Michigan gains 2 Republican members of Congress, but who knows? These are absolute toss-ups. Now, I did put the 10th congressional district in there because it's only an R+3 and it's slightly Republican. I think the Republicans will win that, but keep an eye on that in case it's a big night in Michigan for the Democrats. All right, so we got Minnesota here, and you can see likely Democrat for president, but that's probably more strong. U.S. Senate race, Amy Klobuchar is going to win that, but if you look at the state House and the state Senate, you see that the margins are not that big. In the state House, you have +8, so the Democrats should likely win it, but there's a possibility that could shift. You never know because the Republicans essentially just have to win 4 seats. And in the state Senate, you see that the Democrats only have a 1-seat advantage. That is a chamber that could switch over to the Republicans if they have a good day in Minnesota. Otherwise, the Democrats should be able to hold on to that. And then when it comes to the congressional district in Minnesota, we do have the 2nd congressional district, slightly Democratic, a D+1. Hopefully, Democrats can hold on to that. I feel that they should, but yes, I want to go ahead and put this up there as well. Missouri, no surprise here whatsoever. The Republicans dominating every single race at the state level and the legislative level. Both chambers are going to be Republican. And also the congressional districts are pretty much cooked in. They're already determined and set. Same thing with Mississippi, very Republican state. We don't have anything competitive in the state whatsoever. Moving along on the same trend, Montana's pretty much in that same boat. The only thing is when we look at Montana, we have to look at the U.S. Senate race where Jon Tester is trying to win re-election, and some polling has looked good recently. But it is still, I'm putting it in the slight Republican category. it does look like it's more than likely going to be a loss for the Democrats. One thing I did want to mention, because the last election was really, really close here, was Ryan Zinke's district, the 1st congressional district. You can see it's a R+6, and Zinke's probably going to win it this time by a larger margin. All right, so we have North Carolina, another one of our presidential swing states. We don't have a Senate race, and obviously the gubernatorial race is going very strongly Democratic, and the Democrats are going to retain the governor's mansion in North Carolina. However, they have to deal with a strong Republican legislature. Josh Stein will have to deal with a strong Republican legislature. However, that Senate could, well, likely be Republican, could get a little bit closer. So watch the state Senate races in North Carolina. As far as the 13th congressional district, this is one that's expected to flip back over to the Republican side. So this is expected to be a loss for the Republicans. North Dakota, no surprise here. The Republicans dominate everything, and essentially the North Dakota legislature is, I think, maybe the most Republican one in the entire nation. So we look at Nebraska. We expect Donald Trump to win Nebraska quite heavily. I should have put an asterisk here because we should have that 2nd congressional district in Nebraska going for the Democrats. So it is, yes, strong Republican statewide, but Democrats will win the 2nd congressional district. As you can see, the U.S. Senate race is an absolute toss-up and one that everyone has been looking at. Now, the gubernatorial race, there isn't one, and the legislature is a unicameral, nonpartisan legislature, so we're not looking at any partisanship in this. It just is what it is. When it does come to the Nebraska congressional district, everyone is looking at that 2nd congressional district, and by the polling that we have seen so far, the Democrats have a slight advantage. Now, a lot of people are also looking at the 1st congressional district, and it's an R9, but the numbers have been pretty close when it comes to early voting in that district, but it is likely to be a Republican district. It's likely to be a Republican hold, probably by quite a bit, but maybe closer than what we've seen in the past. Now, New Hampshire becomes a very interesting state. Now, it does lean Democratic, and Kamala Harris should be winning out on Election Day. There are no U.S. Senate races, but you have a very close governor's race in which the Democrats could possibly take back the governorship. We'll see what happens there. As you can see, the State House and the State Senate. The State House, one of the largest deliberative bodies in the Western Hemisphere, maybe even in the world, is a toss-up, and the state Senate is also a toss-up. So if the Democrats do well in New Hampshire, they can sweep everything. The Republicans have the trifecta now. The Democrats could have the trifecta by the end of Tuesday night. Let's see what happens there. So we look at New Jersey. New Jersey is essentially a strong Democratic state. We shouldn't expect anything to really happen there. Some might be talking about the Thomas Keene Jr. congressional seat, but with that name, I think he had a close race at first, but he should be able to keep that congressional seat, and so we're not really seeing too much competitive in New Jersey. Now, when it comes to New Mexico, again, another very strong Democratic state. Democrats should dominate New Mexico, even though Donald Trump decided to do a campaign rally there for some reason. Now, there is one congressional district, Gabe Vasquez in the 2nd congressional district, that could be real strong, but or really close, but it looks like he's doing better in the numbers as of late. So we do come to another swing state in the presidential race, Nevada, and we can see that it is a toss-up. I do think that the Democrats will pull off the Senate victory, even though the presidential race is a toss-up. That one should lean Democratic. There is no governor's race this year, and the House and the Senate are Democratic. However, you see that state Senate margin only, 5. So the Republicans, if they do have a good night in Nevada, which it looks like it could be the case, they could recapture that chamber. And if we look at the congressional districts in Nevada, all of them look to be okay for the Democrats, but they are close districts nonetheless. There could be a surprise in some of the congressional races in Nevada, but I just wanted to throw up the 1st, 3rd, and 4th because you can see those are just +3, +1, +3 for the Democrats. Those could be real key ones to watch out for. So if we look at New York at the statewide level, it is really strong. The Democrats are just dominating everywhere. However, when it comes to the congressional races, this is a little bit different. Because the courts required the redrawing of maps, there are a lot of vulnerable Republicans when it comes to New York. And the gap that the Democrats need to make once you take the Louisiana race, South Louisiana 6th, and the Alabama 2nd. They could make up their margin just in New York alone. So you can see the 1st congressional district is still a little bit Republican and should probably stay that way. The 4th and the 22nd, a lot of experts say that those are going to be Democratic pickups. And then the 17th and the 19th are pure toss-ups at this point. When it comes to Ohio, it leans Republican. Trump will probably win it. There's no gubernatorial race. And the Senate race, as we know, is a toss-up. Sherrod Brown showing a little bit of a lead, but with the numbers right now, it still is a toss-up. It can be really, really close. The State House and the State Senate are controlled by the Republicans. We do have 2 congressional races in Ohio that we have to keep an eye on, the 9th and the 13th. In both of these, you have Republicans +3 and +1, but the Democrats do quite well. Even somebody as liberal as Captor, who she somehow wins, even though the district is becoming more and more Republican. So Marcy Captor should be able to keep her seat, but you never know what will happen on Election Day. If we look at Oklahoma here, absolutely nothing surprising. A very strong Republican state, and the state legislature is not moving a bit. When it comes to Oregon, we do expect Kamala Harris to win Oregon. There is no U.S. Senate seat and no governor's race this year. The State House and the State Senate are likely to stay in Democratic hands. However, we do have the 5th congressional district in Oregon that is just a pure toss-up right now, and it is a Democratic +2 seat. So this is a good potential for a flip for the Democrats. So Pennsylvania is a state that's a big worry for me because you have a lot of things that are not necessarily going in the Democratic direction. As you can see, the presidential race is a toss-up. We have Bob Casey's seat in the Senate, also a toss-up. There's no gubernatorial race. The State House has a 1-seat advantage for the Democrats. They could lose that if this ends up being a very Republican year in Pennsylvania, and the state Senate is already controlled by the Republicans. In addition to that, there are 2 congressional districts, the congressional 7th and the 8th. So this is Wild and Cartwright seats. They could possibly lose as well. This is a very toss-up area. Again, if we're expecting a stronger Republican day on Election Day, then these might flip, meaning that the Democrats need to find those other seats somewhere else. I'm a little bit worried about these seats. When we look at Rhode Island, it's just very strong Democratic. The congressional races are fine as well, even though one was close last time. The Democrats should be dominating both of those this election. South Carolina, also a very, very strong Republican state, and the Republicans will dominate here. There is no U.S. Senate race in South Carolina, and the legislature is just absolutely locked by the Republicans. Same thing for South Dakota. It's a state in which the Republicans dominate, and don't expect any moves here. No U.S. Senate races when it comes to South Dakota. If we look at Tennessee, this is a state for a lot of us who've been watching politics for years, unfortunately saw it go from Al Gore being U.S. Senator there to people not like Al Gore being U.S. Senator there. Tennessee has become an extremely, extremely strong Republican state, and it looks like it's going to be that way for some time. All right, so if we look at Texas, it's a little bit of a mixed bag, but leaning Republican quite heavily. Kamala Harris has a very outside chance of winning the state. Same thing with Colin Allred. He has a better chance than Kamala Harris, but the State House and the State Senate are pretty strong for the Republicans. However, the Democrats could pick up some seats in the House and narrowing that margin. And what's unfortunate is with large states, we looked at California, we've looked at Florida, we've looked at New York, and other large states. We see a lot of competitive races, not in Texas. So we have this 34th congressional district, which was a little close last time. It's a Democratic +9 district, and the Democrats should win it in the election. Utah, no surprise here, extremely strong Republican and will remain so through all of the races. There is a U.S. Senate race. John Curtis will be the senator. And just a little bit of a note, he used to be the Democratic Party chair of Utah County many, many decades ago. All right, so let's go ahead and look at Virginia, and this is another one where we only had the presidential and U.S. Senate race, so we see that both of them are likely to go Democratic. Of course, the State House, the State Senate, and the governor's races, those happen in off-year elections, so we're not going to see anything with that. However, when it comes to the congressional races, the Democrats have a chance in the 2nd congressional district, and then the 7th congressional district, which is Spanberger's seat, is a toss-up right now. Hopefully, Vindman will win that race, but it is basically in that toss-up area. Vermont is the state that just is all over the place. So Kamala Harris will win, Bernie Sanders will win, and Governor Scott will win. All three different parties, but the Democrats are in control of the House and the Senate, usually in coalitions with other parties like the Progressives, but still they wouldn't even need them. They dominate the state so much. Washington state is another state. When we look at the presidential and Senate races, we do see them strongly Democratic. The governor's race might be strongly Democratic as well, but with Reichert being the gubernatorial candidate for the Republicans, he could give the Democrats a run for their money. When we look at the state house and Senate, we do see that it's strongly Democratic. The Republicans have a little bit of a chance in the Senate, but it'll probably likely be Democratic. And when we look at the congressional seats, there are some. So we have the second congressional seat that was won by the Democrats. It's likely to switch back over to the Republicans. This is almost a certain loss for the Democrats, so they'll have to make up that loss somewhere else. The 7th congressional district is Democratic +1. Democrats hold it right now. It is a toss-up. Again, one that the Democrats could lose. When we come to Wisconsin, we all know Wisconsin is a toss-up state when it comes to the presidential level. Tammy Baldwin seems to be doing better in the polls. So this is more of a slightly Democratic Senate seat. There is no governor race this election cycle. But as you can see, even though we're talking about a toss-up state, we see a state house and a state senate that is very strongly Republican. When it does come to congressional races, there are two that people are talking about and targeted by the Democrats. The 1st congressional district, which is down by Racine and Kenosha, and the 3rd congressional district, which is out west. But both of those are likely to be Republican. We'll see what happens. If the Democrats are doing well in Wisconsin, both of these could flip, but probably unlikely. So as you can see here, the Republicans will dominate West Virginia. And of course, the main loss is going to be the Democratic seat of Joe Manchin, now going to the Republicans, giving the Democrats a -1 in the Senate when it comes to this. And finally, Wyoming. It's Wyoming. So, the Republicans are going to win Wyoming. So that's what we have here. No surprise whatsoever. And with that, thank you all very much for joining me. See you in the live stream. Have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.